Hello and welcome to a special Q&A between our narrator Lara Steward, who voices The Silent House and the new book from Nell Pattison, The Silent Night, and of course Nell Pattison herself, who wrote the book. And we're joined today by Kathleen, who is the BSL interpreter who worked on The Silent Night with Lara and is helping us today with communications. So I'm going to hand it over to Nell and Lara to talk a bit more about Lara's process in recording the book and things in general to think about when you're looking to narrate an audiobook.
Okay, well, hi. Yes, as Rebecca said, I am Nell Pattison, author of The Silent House and Silent Night. I've got them both here, just to wave at you. Just, here we go. So both of these have two audiobook narrators because the story is told majority of the time from the perspective of Paige, who is a British Sign Language interpreter herself. And then there are flashback scenes that are told from other characters' perspectives. And Lara, so you narrate the flashback scenes, don't you? The ones kind of that give us a little bit more information about all the different characters. So you did The Silent House, and I actually came down to London to see you recording that, which was great fun. That was a really good experience for me as an author, as a first-time author, to come and see that process. It was really exciting. And now you've done Silent Night as well. So how did the two recording processes compare? How did narrating Silent Night compare to narrating The Silent House? Was there anything different? Anything you found easier the second time or harder?
Well, it was the first time that I had narrated an audiobook, so I hadn't done that before. So I had, done recording and radio with other people, and it was more kind of conversation back and forth. But when it was just me sitting there reading the book, which is beautiful, by the way, I found it was a completely different experience. You have to be able to read much more slowly and much more clearly. I think when you're acting, if the word isn't that clear, you can kind of cover that and make up for it. But because often it's visual and has, I'm signing as well. But if it's just audio, all they can hear is my voice. So it feels almost raw. Because there's nowhere to hide. It's just my voice that I'm providing. But it was a lovely experience. And then the second time, for The Silent Night, I had learned a lot through the first experience, so that I knew when I went in that if there were words that I struggled with, I had the interpreter there and could ask her for help. And the producer, the guy was fantastic. So if there's any words that were maybe difficult to pronounce, then they could be slightly tweaked in the audiobook to convey the same meaning. So all the information, all the story is still there, so don't worry, Nell. But it was lovely. But obviously, because of lockdown and the COVID pandemic, it was very different. But anyway, it was great. I preferred working on the audiobook for the Silent House because there were more people there. There were more people involved in the process who could support. But then the second time, it was different. But I was grateful to have had the first experience previously, that I could bring in what I'd learned, and then I felt much more confident going in the second time. Because if it was the second time, in the current situation, I think it would be much more nerve-wracking because there are few people around. But having had that previous experience, you know, I was much more confident and I knew what I was doing.
So because of COVID requirements, we're only allowing the most essential people to be in the audiobook studio at the moment, which is obviously the narrator, Lara, the producer, which was Richard on this project, and we had Kathleen as well. So for book one, I was sat with the producer Richard, and I was able to feed in anything from sort of a directorial standpoint. But this time I had to stay at home, which isn't as much fun.
Yes, I remember being there, and obviously there were a couple of times we tweaked words in the Silent House. So I remember being there, and obviously you and the producer obviously were a bit more confident, happy to tweak words, when myself as the author was there to say, yeah, that's fine, it's fine, as long as you keep the meaning, I don't care, I'm not attached to that particular word. So obviously, in order to narrate an audiobook, you have to do some preparation in the same way as you would do if you were doing something on stage or something that was being filmed. But what sort of preparation did you feel you had to do, and how did it differ from stage work or film work?
Well, I think there's a huge difference. In theatre, TV, you've got so many sort of emotions that you can put into the words. But with the audiobook, you almost lose some of that emotion. It's not kind of, you have sort of the intonation and it's not flat, but I think what I kind of contribute, a lot of it is visual. Within the book, with people who are listening to the audiobook, then it's more about so yeah, if I'm reading a book and I'm putting in emotions and sort of acting and adding in character details, then it's my perspective on that. But then if I'm reading an audiobook and making sure that it's, you know, slow enough pace, then I wonder if it's less of myself sort of in the recording, and that they're getting that character information from the words and the intonation rather than kind of visually expressing that. I think that's a big difference.
I think that's a challenge for a lot of narrators. It's getting that balance between being able to emote but not distract from the text that the author's written.
Yeah, exactly. And also a lot of my TV and theatre work were through sign language, so or there's no translation for me to do, or, you know, it's no language, I'm doing it through gestures. So in this situation, doing it through English is quite different for me, but it was really lovely.
I'm glad you enjoyed the experience, even though obviously it was challenging for you. I mean, for me personally, I've said this a few times, when I found out that Rebecca had managed to line up 2 deaf actors for the narration for the audiobook, I was so excited, because it wasn't a format I had actually expected to be able to get the representation in. And I know that, you know, in a pipe dream, it'll end up on the TV. And of course, then I hope they'll have very good deaf representation. And I dreamt about that, but I hadn't thought about the audiobook. So I was really pleased. And so if there were other deaf actors who were watching this and who thought, actually, I've never thought about doing voiceover or doing audiobooks or something like that, what advice would you give them if that was something they were looking to do?
Oh, that's just fantastic. I think the most important thing is that it's important is to have your confidence. Voice can be powerful. I think a lot of deaf people, and myself included, we don't really like our voices because we feel like it's not classed as normal for compared to, you know, hearing people, and hearing people aren't used to hearing deaf voices, and it does sound different. However, my advice is be confident, because your voice is what makes you different, and, you know, show that. You know, you can convey your culture, your deafness. That's all beautiful. I think that it's a really big step to have the confidence, and that's the key thing, to be able to do it. Yeah, and don't stress over the words. I think that's important, because if hearing people, you know, can't pronounce all words, so it's similar for deaf people. We're the same. You know, we struggle to pronounce some words. It's fine.
That's why I like to be behind the audiobook recording chair, because there are so many words that I struggle with.
I know that one of the words that that I think was quite difficult in Silent Night, and well, certainly in the Silent House, probably less in Silent Night, was Scunthorpe, which is something I'd never thought about, because this is where my books are set. But I know that Claire Louise had a problem with Scunthorpe as well, didn't she? Is that right, Rebecca? Yeah, and I suppose I hadn't thought about it. It is actually quite a tricky word to say. I'd set it there because I live near here, you know, and that's why it's set there. But yeah, I had never thought about that, and so it was interesting and an experience for me. Despite the fact that I work with deaf students, I work with students who use BSL, and I have done for nearly 15 years. I'm losing my hearing myself. And yet I hadn't thought about certain words and the difficulties of pronunciation, but that's partly because I've grown up hearing, and so I've grown up with the benefits of learning to speak whilst being hearing. But I think it's always interesting to have these things that help you to understand another person's perspective on something that you had never even considered. Right, so yeah, I don't know, Kathleen, if you're gonna like this question. So Lara, in your opinion, what are the best traits that a BSL interpreter like Paige can have? Now, I understand that Paige is not necessarily the best role model for BSL interpreters, and I apologise, Kathleen, and to any other BSL interpreters watching it, for the liberties that I take with your job. But yes, what do you think? What do you think would make Paige a good interpreter? And you can tell me what makes her a bad interpreter as well, having read it, if you like.
So almost like, what are the best character traits for an interpreter? Thinking, I think being helpful. Oh, and I mean, in terms of like going through the audiobook and having an interpreter there, for me it was about the words and being able to you know, break them down and kind of unpack them, so because obviously I can't hear how they're pronounced, so I need to, you know, from those words, kind of break them down into parts. I think maybe I'll go back and explain the process that we followed. So, for example, if it's a difficult word and I'm struggling to pronounce it, then I'll get the interpreter to break the word down into, this part sounds like this part sounds like that, or other words that sound similar, and then bring them together, so then I can pronounce the whole word. I think, yeah, and then I think it's with hearing the word, you know what it sounds like, but then I need to be able to break those down.
I think that definitely I saw the technique used on the Silent House. It's almost like breaking it down into phonics, but instead of using like the phonics that somebody whose first language is English are used to, it's using the kind of phonics that makes sense to you in order to convey how you should be pronouncing those words.
Yeah, exactly.
So right now in Silent Night. Now, no spoilers, but obviously you've I'm assuming you've read the whole thing, not just the sections that you read. So who was your favourite character, and did that change as you went through the book?
Well, so I've only actually read my sections.
Ah, okay.
And I'll explain why I did this. So I so my mum likes to like listen to my work or watch my work. So I prefer to read it at the same time as her, so that we're both at the same kind of pace, and I don't want to spoil it. So I just focused on my sections in my preparation. So I'm waiting till the book's out. But I think my favourite character, I don't think I actually have a favourite character. I think all of them are fantastic. But at the end, you know, learning like what happened at the end, I don't want to sort of say anything. But sort of, so like reading through, then that kind of then coloured my view of the different characters. But I think the Nell, yeah, you're sorry. Nell, your character, how you write the characters, their individual character traits and everything, I feel like I can connect to each and all of them. I think they're all my favourite characters, in different ways, if you know what I mean.
I'm really pleased to hear that, because I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do when I first wrote The Silent House was to be able to write a novel that showed a broad deaf community, because so many novels that I'd read that had deaf characters just had one deaf character in, and they never seemed to have any deaf family or deaf friends or deaf colleagues. You know, they didn't seem to know any other deaf people, and they were usually there to serve a purpose within the plot rather than just to be people. And so that is really good for me to hear, coming from you as a deaf person, that you find the characters have met that, really, that there is a broad deaf community there that shows, you know, such a wide variety of deaf people as there are. You know, this deaf people, there's just as wide a variety as there are of hearing people. It's just a smaller community, you know, so it's...
Yeah, exactly. All of the deaf characters in the book, I feel I can relate to. It's really, really true, and it really makes sense. And that's probably why I can relate to them, because it's very rare to read a book that's fully embracing the deaf community, with the culture, the language, you know, everything. It's beautiful.
Thank you very much. So that's it for my questions. I suppose, is there anything else, either Rebecca, that you want to add in that we've talked about, or anything, Lara, that you'd like to ask or talk about?
I think I'd like to give Kathleen a chance to defend best practice of VSL interpreters. So we have mentioned Paige does take some creative licenses, otherwise there would be no drama in any of the stories. So Kathleen, if there's anything that is a big no-go that you can think of, do jump in.
Yes, I think there are probably quite a few times in the book where I'm like a bit shocked. I don't think I'd do that, but as you say, it was so like important to the story. It was fantastic kind of read, and like reading it, the tension, it just like built and built and built like through the book. It was just really enjoyed reading it, and as you say, Lara, like seeing like so many different deaf characters. Maybe the next book, I don't know, maybe more than one interpreter, more interpreter variety. I don't know.
I don't know what I can tell you about the next book. There's only one interpreter. It's still on the page, I think. Yeah, I don't think I've written any more interpreters. But so Kathleen, have you read the whole thing, or did you just read the bits that Lara's read?
I've read the whole thing.
Did you have a favourite character?
Trying to think now. I think I like the fact they're all like kind of like full characters, and like seem like kind of real people that you can kind of meet. I think
Sorry, I really put you on the spot.
Yeah.
But, you know.
But I think Sasha, actually, I quite liked her character. It was like kind of the support role, and like with the students, and I like them all. I'll steal Lara's answer.
I'm really happy with that. Sorry, I do apologise for putting you on the spot there. And once again, I do apologise, as I say to all BSL interpreters, for the liberties that I take with your role, with my creative licence. I also have a friend who's a police officer, and I ask her various questions that along the lines of, can I do this? And she says, well, no, you can't do that at all, but it's fiction, so you're just going to do what you want, aren't you? So, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so...
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to fiction, we do like to be a bit creative with these things.
That's the fun of it. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope there are people out there who maybe be inspired to join the audiobook career, or to pick up the audiobook edition if you've already enjoyed the print edition. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.